Nepal, a country known for its mountains, temples, and resilient people, is now gripped by one of the largest political crises in recent years. What began as frustration over a government ban on social media has quickly transformed into a nationwide movement led by the country's youth. Streets in Kathmandu and other major cities have turned into battlegrounds between protesters and security forces. Parliament has been set ablaze, the Prime Minister has resigned, and soldiers are patrolling the capital. The unrest has already left dozens dead and hundreds injured, but the protesters are not backing down. They are demanding systemic reform, an interim government, and even a new constitution. To understand why Nepal is in turmoil today, it is important to look at the spark that ignited the unrest, the anger fueling it, and the uncertain path the country now faces. The immediate cause of the protests was the government's sudden decision to ban social media platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and WhatsApp. Officials argued that these platforms were fueling misinformation and undermining national security. For millions of Nepalese, however, social media was more than entertainment. It was a means of communication, a tool for business, and a space for free expression. The ban hit young people particularly hard. Many of them rely on social media for education, activism, and job opportunities. Within hours of the ban, students began marching in the streets of Kathmandu, chanting slogans like, "Shut down corruption, not social media." What might have remained a digital rights issue quickly grew into something larger. The ban became a symbol of government overreach, corruption, and the failure of leaders to connect with the concerns of ordinary citizens. The leading force behind the protests is Nepal's Generation Z, young people in their late teens and 20s. They are the first generation to grow up entirely in a republic after the monarchy was abolished in 2008. They were promised democracy, progress, and opportunities. Instead, they have experienced instability, corruption, and disappointment. Nepal has seen 13 governments in 16 years. Political leaders frequently switch sides, form alliances, and dissolve coalitions, leaving little room for consistent governance. Meanwhile, unemployment remains high, pushing many young Nepalese to migrate abroad for work. For these young protesters, the social media ban was the final straw. It represented not just censorship but also the government's disregard for the voices of the new generation. Their chants are not limited to restoring social media, they are calling for an end to corruption, accountability from leaders, and a future where they do not have to leave their country to survive. The protests began peacefully on September 8, 2025. Students marched in uniform, carrying placards and chanting slogans. Crowds grew larger, spreading beyond Kathmandu to cities across Nepal. The movement's energy was unlike anything seen in the country for years. But as the protests swelled, the government's response hardened. Police used tear gas, water cannons, and rubber bullets to disperse the demonstrators. In some places, they fired live rounds. Protesters, angered by the violence, began throwing stones and setting up barricades. By the second day, scenes of chaos filled Kathmandu. Protesters stormed government buildings, setting the parliament and parts of the Supreme Court on fire. Flames and black smoke rose above the city, symbolizing the breakdown of order. Soldiers were soon deployed, and a strict curfew was declared. The protests have already claimed many lives. Different reports suggest between 19 and 25 people have been killed, including both protesters and police officers. More than 600 people have been injured, some critically. Hospitals in Kathmandu and nearby districts have been overwhelmed. Many of the injured are young students hit by rubber bullets or suffering from gunshot wounds. Families gather outside hospitals in grief and anger, demanding justice. Authorities have also arrested around 25 to 27 people accused of instigating violence, arson, and looting. Yet, despite the arrests and casualties, the protests continue to grow. The political fallout has been swift and dramatic. Prime Minister K.P. Sharma Ali, a dominant figure in Nepalese politics for years, announced his resignation under immense pressure. Shortly afterward, he disappeared from the public eye, leaving a leadership vacuum. With no clear civilian authority in charge, the army has stepped in to restore order. Soldiers now patrol Kathmandu's streets, guard government buildings, and enforce the curfew. Checkpoints have been set up across the city, and the airport has been secured. The military presence has brought temporary calm, but it also raises concerns about democracy. Many fear that extended military control could undermine civilian governance further. The protesters are no longer satisfied with small concessions. They are demanding deep structural change, including a new, inclusive constitution that addresses corruption and ensures accountability. The dissolution of the current parliament. The formation of an interim government to oversee reforms. One of the proposed figures for interim leadership is Sushila Karki, a former Chief Justice of Nepal known for her integrity. Protesters believe she could act as a neutral caretaker until new elections or reforms are implemented. These demands go far beyond the original anger over the social media ban. They reflect a desire to completely reshape Nepal's political system. For ordinary citizens, life under curfew has been difficult. Shops remain closed, schools and colleges are shut down, and public transport has halted. Families struggle to buy essentials, and businesses face huge losses. Tourists have also been caught in the unrest. Groups of Indian travelers reported being stranded in Kathmandu, unable to leave until special arrangements were made. The usually vibrant city, known for its bustling markets and cultural landmarks, now feels like a city under siege. Nepal's crisis has not gone unnoticed by its neighbors. India, in particular, is deeply concerned. Thousands of Indian citizens visit or work in Nepal, and instability threatens cross-border trade and security. The Indian government has set up emergency cells to assist stranded citizens and urged Nepal to resolve the crisis peacefully. International organizations and human rights groups have condemned the use of excessive force against protesters. They have called for dialogue between the government and youth leaders to prevent further bloodshed. To understand the depth of today's unrest, it is necessary to recall Nepal's recent history. The monarchy was abolished in 2008 after a decade-long civil war and mass protests. The country was declared a republic, and hopes were high for a stable democracy. But since then, instability has persisted. Governments collapse frequently, corruption scandals dominate headlines, and public trust in politicians remains low. Earlier in 2025, Nepal witnessed pro-monarchy protests, with some groups calling for the return of King Gyanendra. Teachers also staged large demonstrations against education reforms. The Gen Z protests are part of this broader pattern of discontent, evidence that frustration with the political system runs deep across society. Behind the statistics of deaths and injuries are human stories. Parents mourning their children killed in clashes. Friends carrying the wounded through the streets. Young protesters who believed they were marching for a better future, only to end up in hospital beds. These stories highlight the cost of political instability. For families, the protests are not abstract, they are life and death, hope and despair. The courage of the young protesters is inspiring, but the losses they endure are devastating. Nepal now faces an uncertain future. Several scenarios are possible. 1. Dialogue and reform. The government could agree to protesters' demands for an interim government and constitutional reform, opening a new chapter for Nepal. 2. Military dominance. Prolonged army control could bring temporary stability but risk undermining democracy. 3. Continued unrest. If neither side compromises, protests could drag on, leading to further violence and instability. The outcome will depend on whether Nepal's leaders choose to listen to the youth or try to suppress them. Nepal is at a turning point. A social media ban has ignited one of the most significant youth-led movements in the country's history. The protests have already forced the resignation of the Prime Minister and drawn international attention. Yet the real battle is not about social,